The crystalline halls of Kepler Station stretched endlessly in all directions, their surfaces reflecting the light of distant stars through massive transparent walls. Ambassador Lisa Morgan walked slowly down the corridor, her formal black diplomatic uniform a stark contrast against the flowing organic curves of alien architecture. Her footsteps echoed in the vast space, each sound reminding her that she was very far from home and very much alone. 3 times she had made this journey. 3 times she had stood before the Galactic Council with humanity's formal request for membership. And now, for the 3rd and final time, she was about to receive their answer. The weight of her entire species' future pressed down on her shoulders. As she approached the council chambers, the doors opened without sound, revealing a massive amphitheater where representatives from dozens of worlds sat in graceful floating pods. At the center, Council Speaker Zeth Kari waited on his elevated platform. His 4 eyes, each the size of a dinner plate, watched her approach with what might have been sympathy or pity. His silver skin gleamed under the chamber's soft lighting, and when he spoke, the universal translator rendered his words in perfect English. "Ambassador Morgan," he began, his voice carrying the weight of centuries. "We have reviewed your species' application for membership in the Galactic Council for the 3rd time. We have studied your history, your culture, your technological achievements, and your potential contributions to our peaceful alliance." Lisa stood perfectly still, her hands clasped behind her back in the military posture she had learned during her service years. She had spent months preparing for this moment, rehearsing arguments and responses, gathering evidence of humanity's readiness to join galactic civilization. But something in Zeth Kari's tone told her that all her preparation had been wasted. "Your species shows remarkable promise," the council speaker continued. "Your scientific advancement is impressive. Your cultural diversity is fascinating. Your determination and resilience are qualities we admire. However, after careful consideration and extensive debate, the council has reached a unanimous decision." Chamber fell silent. Lisa could hear her own heartbeat in her ears. "Humanity's application for membership is denied." The words hit Lisa like a physical blow. Around the chamber, alien representatives nodded in agreement, their various forms of approval rippling through the crowd like a wave. She had expected this outcome, but hearing it spoken aloud still felt like watching her world crumble. "May I ask why?" Lisa managed to keep her voice steady despite the crushing disappointment. Zeth Kari's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a gesture she had learned indicated reluctance to deliver unpleasant news. "Your species' history concerns us greatly, Ambassador. In the past 1,000 years alone, you have engaged in countless wars. Your people seem incapable of resolving disputes without violence. Even now, as you reach for the stars, conflicts rage across your homeworld." "But we're learning," Lisa protested. "We're growing. Every species must have gone through similar growing pains." "Perhaps," Zeth Kari acknowledged. "But most species demonstrate clear progress toward peaceful coexistence before achieving interstellar travel. Your people achieved faster-than-light flight while still maintaining massive military forces. You carry weapons to diplomatic meetings. You negotiate from positions of strength rather than mutual understanding." Another council member, a crystalline being from the Shard Worlds, spoke up. "Your entertainment glorifies conflict. Your sports are based on competition and dominance. Your very language is filled with military metaphors. When you describe success, you use words like conquest and victory. When you face challenges, you fight them or battle them." Lisa felt her careful diplomatic composure beginning to crack. "Those are just words, metaphors. They don't define who we are as a people." "But they reveal how you think," Zeth Kari replied gently. "Ambassador, we do not question your personal commitment to peace, nor do we doubt that many humans share your noble intentions. But your species as a whole remains too unpredictable, too aggressive, too dangerous to integrate into our peaceful alliance." "You're making a mistake," Lisa said, her voice rising despite her efforts to remain calm. Humanity has so much to offer. Our creativity, our problem-solving abilities, our refusal to give up in the face of impossible odds. These qualities could benefit every member of the Council, and they could also disrupt the harmony we have maintained for over 10,000 years, countered a representative from the Harmony Collective. Your species' default response to any problem is to apply force. When your crops fail, you force the land to produce more. When your people disagree, you force them to comply. When you encounter the unknown, you seek to dominate it rather than understand it. Lisa looked around the chamber, searching for any sign of support among the assembled representatives. She found none. Every alien face, whether humanoid or utterly foreign, showed the same mixture of pity and fear. They saw humanity as children playing with dangerous toys, too immature to be trusted with the responsibilities of galactic citizenship. What would it take? She asked finally. What would humanity need to do to prove we're ready? Zethkari was quiet for a long moment, his 4 eyes studying her with an expression she couldn't read. Return to your home system, Ambassador. Convince your people to abandon their aggressive ways. Eliminate warfare from your world. Develop truly peaceful solutions to your conflicts. Perhaps in a few centuries, when your species has learned to live in harmony, we can revisit this discussion. And until then, we believe it would be best for all concerned if humanity remained isolated. The quantum gate connecting your system to Council space will be deactivated. Consider this an opportunity for reflection and growth. The finality in his voice left no room for argument. Lisa felt the last of her diplomatic training desert her, as anger flared in her chest. You're cutting us off completely, treating us like prisoners in our own system? We're protecting both our civilizations from a potentially dangerous situation, Zethkari replied. This decision was not made lightly. Ambassador, we genuinely hope that someday circumstances will allow us to reconsider. Lisa straightened her shoulders and looked directly into his 4 eyes. You're making the biggest mistake in the history of this council. Humanity doesn't give up. We don't quit. And we don't forget. We hope you will prove us wrong, Zethkari said. But until that day comes, this decision stands. 3 days later, Lisa stood on the observation deck of the transport ship carrying her home, watching as the massive quantum gate that connected Earth to the rest of the galaxy powered down for the final time. The swirling energy collapsed into nothing, leaving only empty space where humanity's window to the stars had been. Captain Jake Sullivan joined her at the viewport, his weathered face grim as he watched their connection to galactic civilization disappear. So that's it then, he said quietly. We're on our own. They think they've solved a problem, Lisa replied, her voice hard with determination. They have no idea what they've just created. 50 years had passed since the quantum gate closed, and the galaxy had grown comfortable with silence. In the great halls of Kepler Station, council members spoke of humanity in past tense, as if they were just another failed species that had destroyed itself in some meaningless conflict. The betting pools among younger council staff had long since been settled, with most agreeing that Earth had probably gone dark within the first decade. On Earth, Admiral Kate Morrison stood before the largest display screen ever constructed, watching as the final components of Shipyard 7 locked into place in the asteroid belt beyond Mars. The massive construction facility stretched for hundreds of kilometers, its skeletal framework bristling with manufacturing arms and assembly platforms. It was one of 12 such yards that humanity had built in the shadows of their solar system, hidden from any possible observation by alien sensors. Final structural integrity check complete, reported Chief Engineer Danny Walsh from his station. Shipyard 7 is ready for full production, Admiral. Kate nodded, her weathered face showing the strain of 5 decades spent preparing for this moment. The isolation had done something unexpected to humanity. Instead of turning inward and destroying themselves as the Council predicted, they had unified like never before. Every nation on Earth had contributed to the project. Every corporation had shared their technology. Every individual had accepted the rationing and sacrifice necessary to build the largest military fleet in human history. "Begin construction of the first squadron," Kate ordered, "and send my compliments to Dr. Carter. Without his breakthrough, none of this would be possible." In the hidden laboratories beneath Europa's ice, Dr. Ryan Carter was already working on the next impossible problem. The quantum entanglement patterns that governed faster-than-light travel had been cracked 15 years ago. But Ryan wasn't satisfied with simply copying Council technology. Humanity needed to be better, faster, and completely undetectable when they finally returned to galactic space. "The new jump drives are ready for testing," announced his assistant, Dr. Monica Price, as she reviewed the latest data streams. "The energy efficiency is 3 times better than standard Council drives, and the quantum signature is completely different. Their sensors won't even recognize our ships as artificial constructs." Ryan smiled grimly as he watched the test data scroll across his screen. The Council had made a critical error in their understanding of human nature. They thought isolation would weaken humanity, force them to become more peaceful and cooperative. Instead, it had given them the greatest gift possible: a common enemy, and unlimited time to prepare. The breakthrough that changed everything had come from studying humanity's own violent history. While Council species had spent millennia in peaceful cooperation, humans had never stopped fighting. Every war, every conflict, every hard-won lesson about survival and warfare had been preserved in their historical records. What the Council saw as humanity's greatest weakness had become their greatest strength. Commander Amy Brooks stood in the testing facility on Luna, watching as the latest prototype weapon system reduced a decommissioned asteroid to glowing debris in seconds. The weapon used principles that Council scientists had dismissed as too dangerous to research. Human engineers had no such limitations. "Power output is stable," reported her weapons specialist, Lieutenant Carl Martinez. "The particle beam maintains coherence at maximum range, and the targeting system can track multiple fast-moving targets simultaneously." Amy studied the test results with satisfaction. The weapon was just one of hundreds that human scientists had developed during the isolation years. While Council races had grown soft and comfortable in their peaceful paradise, humanity had retained their edge. Every instinct for warfare and survival that evolution had given them had been channeled into creating technologies that would have given the Council nightmares. The transformation hadn't been limited to military technology. Human society itself had evolved during the isolation. The old divisions between nations and cultures had largely disappeared, replaced by a shared identity as the species that had been rejected by the galaxy. Children grew up learning not just human history, but the history of every Council species, studying their weaknesses and blind spots with the dedication of military strategists. Admiral Morrison received regular reports from deep space monitoring stations positioned at the edge of the solar system. For 50 years, they had watched and listened, cataloging every Council ship movement, every communication, every sign of political change in galactic civilization. The picture that emerged was exactly what human strategists had predicted. The Council races were growing weaker. Their military forces were primarily ceremonial, maintained more for tradition than actual defense. Their technology had stagnated, with most innovations focused on comfort and convenience rather than capability. Most telling of all, their birth rates were declining across multiple species, suggesting a civilization that had lost the will to grow and expand. "They've become exactly what they accused us of being unable to become," Kate told her senior staff during one of their regular planning meetings. "Peaceful, cooperative, and completely unprepared for the realities of a dangerous universe." The irony wasn't lost on any of them. Humanity had learned to cooperate on a scale never before seen in their history, but they had done it by channeling their competitive and aggressive instincts toward a common goal. The Council had wanted them to abandon their violent nature, but instead they had refined it into something far more dangerous than random aggression: focused, disciplined, and absolutely determined purpose. The final piece of the puzzle came from intercepted Council communications. Dr. Helen Ross, working from the Intelligence Center on Titan, made the discovery that shattered any remaining doubts about their mission. Analysis of Council biological data revealed that their peaceful paradise was literally breeding the fight out of them. Genetic markers associated with aggression, competition, and innovation were disappearing from their populations with each generation. "They're not evolving toward peace," Helen explained to Admiral Morrison during their weekly briefing. "They're evolving toward extinction. They've created a society so safe and comfortable that natural selection has stopped favoring survival traits." The implications were staggering. The Council hadn't just rejected humanity because they were afraid of human violence. They had rejected them because somewhere, deep down, they recognized that humanity represented everything they had lost and could never regain. The very qualities that made humans dangerous were the same qualities that had once made the Council races great. As the 50th anniversary of the gate closure approached, humanity was ready. The shipyards had produced a fleet that dwarfed anything in Council space. The research stations had developed weapons and defenses that made human vessels nearly invincible. Most importantly, humanity had learned patience. They had spent half a century planning for this moment, and they would not waste it on empty revenge. Admiral Morrison stood once again before the great display screen, but now it showed not construction, yards but battle formations. Thousands of ships hung in space like sleeping predators, waiting for the order to remind the galaxy why isolating humanity had been the worst mistake in Council history. The Zephyrian trade convoy had been following the same route for over 30 years without incident. Captain Vlixmar guided his ships through the peaceful emptiness between star systems, cargo holds full of rare minerals and exotic technologies, bound for the core worlds. His crew was relaxed, some even sleeping at their stations. In Council space, there had been no real threats for generations. The first sign that something was wrong came from the sensor operator, a young Zephyrian named Kessatal, who had never seen combat in his life. "Captain, I'm detecting an energy. Signature approaching from the outer system. Configuration unknown." Vlixmar barely looked up from his meal. "Probably just a Council patrol ship running late. Send them our identification codes and shipping manifest." But Kessatal's voice grew more urgent. "Sir, the signature doesn't match any known Council vessel, and it's big. Much bigger than a patrol ship." The captain finally moved to his sensor station, his scaled skin rippling with mild annoyance. What he saw on the display made his blood run cold. The approaching vessel was massive, easily 3 times the size of his largest cargo hauler, and its hull seemed to bend light around it, in ways that hurt to look at directly. "Unknown vessel. This is Captain Vlixmar of the Zephyrian Trading Collective. Please identify yourself and state your intentions." The response came immediately, in perfect galactic standard, but with an accent that made Vlixmar's stomach clench with sudden fear. "Attention, Zephyrian vessel. This is Captain Neil Parker of the Terran Federation Navy. Your Council voted to exclude humanity from galactic civilization. We're here to collect on that debt." For a moment, the bridge was silent except for the hum of life support systems. Then Vlixmar found his voice. "I don't understand. Humans were isolated 50 years ago. Your species was cut off from Council space." Captain Parker's laugh was cold and humorless. "Cut off, yes. Eliminated, no. We've been waiting a long time for this conversation, Captain. Your government supported our isolation. Your trade routes profit from our absence. Consider this an overdue tax collection." The human ship moved closer, and Vlixmar could see that it bristled with weapons unlike anything in Council arsenals. Sleek energy projectors ran along its hull like predatory teeth, and launch bays gaped open to reveal smaller craft that seemed to shimmer with barely contained energy. "Look, Captain Parker," Vlixmar said, trying to keep his voice steady. "I'm just a trader. I have no authority over council politics. My ships carry civilians and cargo, nothing more." "Your ships carry technology," Parker corrected. "Technology that was developed using resources and trade networks that deliberately excluded humanity. Your people voted to isolate us. Now you get to experience what isolation feels like." Warning lights began flashing across the Zephyrian bridge as the human vessel targeted their engines and weapon systems. But instead of firing, smaller ships began launching from the human craft, moving with speed and precision that made Vlixmar dizzy to watch. "Boarding craft incoming," reported Kessatal, his voice barely a whisper. "Should we resist?" Vlixmar looked at his crew of peaceful traders and shook his head. "With what? We're not a military vessel. Send a distress signal to the nearest council, world, and prepare to be boarded." The human boarding parties cut through the cargo ship's hull as if it were made of paper. They moved through the corridors like flowing water, their dark armor making them nearly invisible in the ship's dim lighting. But when they finally appeared on the bridge, they moved with careful discipline rather than wild aggression. The human boarding leader removed her helmet, revealing a young woman with short brown hair and eyes like chips of ice. "I'm Lieutenant Susan Gray. Nobody needs to get hurt here. We're not pirates or raiders. We're collectors." "What do you want?" Vlixmar asked. "Everything," Susan replied simply. "Every piece of advanced technology, every data core containing council scientific information, every component that could be useful to humanity's development. Think of it as 50 years of back taxes." The human soldiers worked with terrifying efficiency. They stripped the convoy of its quantum communicators, its jump drive components, its advanced sensors and navigation equipment. They copied every data file and technical manual they could find. But they also provided the Zephyrian crew with basic food, water, and medical supplies. "Why aren't you killing us?" Vlixmar asked Susan as her team finished their work. Susan looked at him with something that might have been pity. "Because we're not the monsters your council thinks we are. We're just people who were pushed too far and decided to push back. Your crew will be released with enough supplies to reach the nearest council world. And our cargo? Consider it a donation to humanity's cause. Don't worry, Captain. You'll live to tell this story. That's the whole point. Within hours, reports began flooding into council space from across the galaxy. Human ships had appeared everywhere at once, hitting supply convoys, research stations, and isolated outposts with surgical precision. No one was killed, but the losses were staggering. Decades of advanced technology and scientific data simply vanished into human hands. On Kepler Station, emergency sessions erupted as panicked reports came in from dozens of systems. Council Speaker Zeth Kari, now much older than when he had rejected humanity 50 years earlier, stared at the tactical displays in growing horror. "How many ships?" he asked his military advisor, a crystalline being whose natural glow had dimmed. "To almost nothing." "We don't know," came the reply. "They appear without warning, complete their missions, and vanish before our forces can respond. Our sensors can barely detect them, and when they do, the readings make no sense." "What do they want?" demanded the representative from the Harmony Collective. The answer came from Admiral Seth Williams, whose image appeared on the council chamber's main screen. His face was weathered and scarred, and his eyes held the cold certainty of someone who had spent decades planning for this moment. "Council Speaker Zeth Kari," Williams said, his voice carrying clearly across the chamber. "You wanted us to learn about peaceful coexistence. We did. We learned that peace is a luxury available only to those strong enough to choose it. You took that choice away from us, so we made ourselves strong enough to take it back." Around the chamber, alien representatives began talking at once, their voices rising in panic and confusion. but Williams continued speaking, and his words cut through the noise like a blade. For 50 years, you've enjoyed the benefits of a galaxy without humans. Now you get to experience what a galaxy with humans really looks like. We're coming home, whether you like it or not. The emergency sessions had been running for 3 straight days without break. Council Speaker Zeth Kari looked older than his 800 years as he reviewed the latest reports from across galactic space. The humans weren't just raiding anymore. They were making a statement, and that statement was becoming impossible to ignore. 17 more supply convoys hit in the past 48 hours, reported Defense Coordinator Threxmal, his crystalline body flickering with nervous energy. They took everything of value and left the crews with basic supplies and directions to the nearest council world. No casualties, but the economic impact is devastating. Around the council chamber, representatives from dozens of worlds sat in stunned silence. For over 10,000 years, the galaxy had known peace. Wars were things that happened to primitive species on isolated worlds, not to the advanced civilizations of the council. The very idea that someone could challenge their authority had become unthinkable. "Have we been able to track any of their ships?" asked the delegate from the Serenity Systems. Threxmal's light dimmed further. "Our sensors can barely detect them when they're right in front of us. When they jump to faster-than-light speed, they leave no trace at all. It's as if they simply vanish from existence." Zeth Kari studied the tactical display that dominated the center of the chamber. Red markers showed the locations of human attacks, and the pattern made his 4 hearts sink. The humans weren't striking randomly. They were systematically targeting the most advanced research facilities, the richest trade routes, and the most strategically important outposts. Someone had spent decades studying council operations and planning this campaign with terrifying precision. "What about our defense fleets?" he asked. "They're trying," Threxmal replied. "But every engagement ends the same way. Human ships appear. Disable our vessels without destroying them, evacuate the crews, and strip the ships for useful technology. Our weapons can't penetrate their armor, and our ships can't match their speed or maneuverability." The truth was even worse than Threxmal was willing to admit in open session. The few council military officers who had survived encounters with human forces told stories that bordered on the impossible. Human ships that could vanish and reappear at will. Weapons that could disable entire fleets without firing a single destructive shot. Boarding parties that moved through council vessels like ghosts, taking what they wanted and leaving without a trace. Admiral Beth Cameron was planning something much more dramatic than raiding supply convoys. Her task force of 12 ships hung in the darkness between star systems, invisible to council sensors, while she reviewed the intelligence reports that had taken 50 years to compile. She was about to do something that no enemy of the council had ever attempted, strike at the heart of their civilization. "Final system checks complete," reported her tactical officer, Commander Steve Watson. "All ships report ready for jump." Beth looked at the display showing Kepler Station, the massive space habitat that served as the council's capital. Millions of beings lived and worked there, representatives from every member species of the Galactic Alliance. It was protected by the most advanced defense systems in known space, surrounded by automated platforms that could destroy entire fleets. "Remember," she told her crew over the ship's communication system, "this is a demonstration, not a massacre. We're here to prove a point, not to start a genocide. Disable their defenses, deliver our message, and withdraw. Clean and professional." The human fleet materialized around Kepler Station like predators emerging from tall grass. The massive defense platforms that protected the council's capital tried to target the human vessels, but their targeting computers couldn't lock onto ships that seemed to exist only partially in normal space. Warning alarms screamed across the station as millions of inhabitants realized they were under attack. Beth's face appeared on every communication screen throughout the station, her image broadcasting on all frequencies simultaneously. "Council, Speaker Zeth Kari," she said, her voice calm and controlled. This is Admiral Beth Cameron of the Terran Federation Navy. I believe we have some unfinished business to discuss. In the council chamber, chaos erupted as representatives shouted questions and demands that no one could answer. How had human ships penetrated the most heavily defended location in the galaxy? How were they broadcasting on secure council frequencies? How were they doing any of this? You wanted us to learn about peaceful coexistence, Beth continued, her image now filling the main display in the council chamber. We did. We learned that peace requires strength to maintain it. We learned that cooperation means everyone gets a voice, not just the species you approve of. Most importantly, we learned that isolation doesn't make dangerous species go away. It just makes them more dangerous. Zethkari found his voice finally. What do you want, Admiral Cameron? If this is revenge for our decision 50 years ago, then take it and be done. Beth's smile was cold and humorless. This isn't revenge, Speaker. This is education. For 50 years, your people have lived in a galaxy shaped by our absence. You've grown soft and comfortable believing that peace comes from excluding those who might disrupt your harmony. We're here to teach you what real peace looks like. The demonstration that followed was precisely calculated to shatter Council confidence without causing massive loss of life. Human ships disabled the orbital defense platforms one by one, their weapons cutting through advanced shields and armor, like they were made of paper. Boarding parties secured key communication nodes and military command centers, but they also provided medical aid to injured Council personnel and carefully avoided damaging civilian areas. Dr. Helen Ross had been waiting decades for this moment. Working from her laboratory ship, she began broadcasting the results of her genetic analysis of Council species across all scientific channels. The data was devastating and undeniable. Every major Council species was losing the biological markers associated with aggression, innovation, and competitive drive. Their peaceful paradise wasn't making them better. It was making them extinct. Your birth rates are declining, Helen's voice echoed through scientific institutions across the galaxy. Your technological advancement has stagnated. Your military capabilities have atrophied to the point of uselessness. You've created a society so safe and comfortable that evolution has stopped selecting for survival traits. The implications hit the Council like a physical blow. They weren't just being attacked by a militarily superior force. They were being confronted with the evidence of their own slow suicide. Humanity represented everything they had been and everything they were losing. As Beth's fleet prepared to withdraw, she delivered her final message to the Council. We'll be in touch soon to discuss terms for our return to galactic civilization. I suggest you spend that time considering whether you want humanity as your enemy or your protector. The human ships vanished as suddenly as they had appeared, leaving behind a shattered defense network and a Council that finally understood the magnitude of their mistake 50 years earlier. The war that wasn't really a war ended 3 weeks after the attack on Kepler Station. Council Speaker Zethkari sat alone in his private chambers, staring out at the stars through the massive transparent wall that overlooked the galaxy. His adorate 4 eyes were dim with exhaustion and defeat as he composed the message that would change everything. Admiral Beth Cameron received the transmission while her fleet was stationed in the asteroid belt of the Proxima system. The message was simple and devastating in its humility. Admiral Cameron, this is Council Speaker Zethkari. I formally request a meeting to discuss terms for humanity's return to galactic civilization. I will come to you. 3 days later, Zethkari's personal transport docked with Beth's flagship, the Retribution. The Council Speaker looked far older than when he had dismissed Ambassador Lisa Morgan 50 years earlier. His silver skin had dulled to gray, and his movements showed the weight of centuries that seemed to have suddenly caught up with him. Beth met him in the main conference room, a simple space with human furniture and human decorations that looked strange to alien eyes. Zethkari took the offered seat carefully, his large frame not quite fitting the human-sized chair. You could have destroyed us, he said without preamble. Your ships, your weapons, your technology. You could have wiped out every council world and claimed the galaxy for yourselves. Beth poured herself a cup of coffee from the service beside her chair, the simple human ritual somehow making the moment feel more real. That would have made us conquerors, not protectors. We didn't spend 50 years preparing for revenge. We spent them preparing to do the job you should have been doing all along. What job is that? Protecting the galaxy, Beth replied simply. Not just from outside threats, but from the stagnation and decay that comes from being too comfortable for too long. Zethkari was quiet for a long moment, processing implications that his peaceful civilization had never been forced to consider. What do you want from us? Beth activated a holographic display that showed the current state of galactic civilization. Star charts revealed the locations of every council world, every trade route, every military installation. But overlaid on that familiar map were new markers that made Zethkari's heart sink. The Devourers are coming, Beth said quietly. Our deep space monitoring stations detected their scout fleets 6 months ago. They're still 3 years out, but they're definitely heading for council space. The ancient enemy that had nearly destroyed galactic civilization 10,000 years ago was returning. Zethkari felt his already dim hope flicker and die. The council barely remembered how to fight pirates and raiders. They had no chance against the species that had once consumed entire star systems. Your military records show that the last time the Devourers attacked, it took the combined fleets of 50 species and nearly 1,000 years of warfare to drive them back into dark space, Beth continued. How many warships does the Council have now? Zethkari didn't need to consult his files. The numbers were burned into his memory from countless emergency sessions. Maybe 300 real combat vessels spread across 47 systems. Most of them are outdated ceremonial ships that haven't seen action in centuries. We have 2,000 ships ready for combat, with production facilities that can build 1,000 more within the year, Beth said. Our weapons can penetrate Devourer armor. Our tactics are designed specifically for fighting a numerically superior enemy. But most importantly, we remember how to fight. The offer was simple and devastating. Humanity would take responsibility for galactic defense, but that meant humanity would also take responsibility for galactic governance. The old council system would be dissolved and replaced with a new Terran Federation that included all willing species as equals. Many of our member species will resist, Zethkari warned. They've grown comfortable with the current system. They can resist all they want, Beth replied. But when the Devourers arrive, they'll discover that comfort isn't much protection against extinction. The first test of the new order came sooner than anyone expected. The Harmony Collective, a group of 12 worlds that had been among the most vocal opponents of human leadership, declared their independence from both the Council and the proposed Federation. They would defend themselves, they announced, using the power of peaceful cooperation and diplomatic negotiation. The Devourers found them 6 weeks later. Admiral Cameron led the relief fleet that arrived to find the Harmony worlds burning. The massive bioships of the Devourers hung in orbit around what had once been garden worlds, their living hulls pulsing with stolen energy as they consumed everything of value. The peaceful Harmony fleets had been destroyed so quickly that many ships still showed no sign of weapons damage. They had simply been boarded and devoured. The battle that followed was fierce and costly, but human tactics and technology proved superior to Devourer bioweapons. The ancient enemy had expected to find the same soft targets they had encountered millennia before. Instead, they found predators who had been honed by isolation into the galaxy's finest warriors. Human ships moved like schools of fish, coordinating their attacks with precision that confused and overwhelmed the Devourer fleet. Weapons that the Council had dismissed as too dangerous to research proved devastating against bio-armor that had once been nearly invulnerable. Most importantly, human crews fought with the desperate courage of a species that knew what extinction looked like. The surviving Harmony world surrendered to the Terran Federation before the last Devourer ship was destroyed. Within 6 months, every major Council species had formally requested Federation membership. The alternative was facing the returning enemy alone. Ambassador Lisa Morgan, now an elderly woman with silver hair and deep lines around her eyes, stood, once again in the chambers where humanity had been rejected half a century earlier. But this time, she wasn't asking for admission. She was announcing humanity's protection of species too peaceful to protect themselves. "You wanted us to learn about coexistence," she said, addressing the assembled representatives of 100 worlds. "We did. We learned that true peace comes, not from weakness, but from strength wielded with wisdom. We learned that cooperation requires everyone to contribute, not just the species you find comfortable." The galaxy had tried to silence humanity. Instead, they had forged them into exactly what the galaxy needed. Protectors who understood that sometimes the most violent species makes the most peaceful civilization possible. The Council had paid the price for their arrogance. But in the end, the galaxy was better for it. The Devourers learned that lesson too, as their invasion fleets met human battle groups at the edge of known space. The ancient enemy found that the galaxy they remembered no longer existed. In its place was something far more dangerous, a civilization that had learned to fight.